back to our next session. For all of those people who joined last time, welcome back. For all of the people who didn't, welcome for the first time. Today we're going to be having a looking at well-being and resilience strategies. And again, we're really going to have a look at this from a scientific bias to show you all of the research that's been done throughout the world and some real practical things that you can actually do to actually build resilience and well-being. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we kick off. If you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A section. Also, underneath, under the bottom of your screen, there should be a green icon with that says resource list. In that area, you will find this presentation in a PDF format with some notes, so you can have a look at that later, and also a link to last time's presentation around understanding and managing fear. So, without any further ado, let's kick off. The first thing that I did want to do is to quickly recap one of the key things that we talked about last week, and that is about the brain and the basic organizing principle of the brain, and just reminding ourselves about the biochemical things that are going on in your body. So first of all, we are wired for minimizing danger and maximizing reward. Two key responses here. One is the threat response that we know that comes about through experiencing negative emotions like fear, anger, etc. This will create the fight, flight, or freeze that will keep us alive. And we also have the reward response, which is all about positive emotions, and that will generate some really good neurotransmitters in us. Now, remembering that when we do have that threat response, we get a rise in adrenaline and cortisol and a drop in dopamine. So remembering cortisol is that hormone, that's the stress hormone. It is the hormone that impacts our digestion and our immune system. So not great to have that stuff floating around in your body for a long time. It will keep you alive, but it won't allow you to thrive. And dopamine, the feel-good stuff, the feel-good neurotransmitter actually depletes. So that's your threat response, and the reward response is the opposite. So we get a reduction in the cortisol levels, and we get an increase in the dopamine levels. So last week, what we looked at was what goes on in response to fear. So we really hung around this threat response, the negative emotions area, quite a lot last week, and looked at strategies to deal with that. This time, we're taking a proactive view, and we're really going to focus in on the positive emotions and the research that's been done into positive emotion we can actually do to get more of it. So let's have a look and start off with some of the key research by a doctor out of Stanford University. Her name is Barbara Fredrickson. She's written many books, so you could certainly Google her, Barbara Fredrickson, and you'll have her name here. And she instigated a very key and popular theory called the broaden and build theory. So her field of expertise is actually researching positive emotions and their impact on human beings physically and mentally. And that's what you're seeing in front of you here. So what she found is that the more we experience positive emotions, the more what we call our action repertoire broadens. So things broaden and we build our resources. And they build in 4 key areas, as you can see here. So number 1 is that your physical resources get better. So imagine you are in a really good mood, and you've been in a great mood for a long time. So imagine yourself in that really positive mindset. And this will start to make sense. So number 1 is that your physical resources get better. So your coordination improves, your cardiovascular system improves, even things like your grip strength improves when you are experiencing a positive emotion. It's weird, isn't it? So think about it from a perspective, like imagine you're in a foul, grumpy, negative mood and you're sitting on the couch. What are you likely to do? Probably stay there. But if you were in a really positive mood, a really up mood, experiencing a positive emotion, and you're sitting on the couch, you're probably wanting to get off the couch and do something. You're more motivated to do something. So the more likely that is, then you're going to move more, and it has this knock-on effect, and it builds and grows. So your physical resources get better. You get physically healthier. The next one is your psychological resources get better. So what this means is that when you're experiencing positive emotions, you tend to develop more resilience. You're more optimistic. You tend to see the glasses half full rather than half empty. You're much more likely to set yourself some goals and move towards achieving them. So psychologically, you get better if you are experiencing a positive emotion. Other thing that happens is your social resources get better. So when you're in a positive mood, our bodies are producing a chemical called oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is the bonding hormone. It allows us to connect with other people. It's a very natural thing. If you're a female and you've given birth, you get bucket loads of oxytocin during the act of childbirth. It's the bonding hormone. It makes us fall in love with our children, so we bond to them. It's a very natural chemical. But we get that when we're actually surrounded by other people. So when you're in a positive mood and you are experiencing oxytocin, you are more likely to get up off that couch and go and meet people, more likely to go to that party. You're more likely to develop new relationships and build on existing relationships if you are in a positive state of mind. And lastly, your intellectual resources get better. So this is cool. You actually get a bit smarter. So if you think about it, your positive mood, you're more likely to want to learn something. You actually develop better problem-solving skills. You actually start to see things from the bigger picture. So it's metaphorically speaking, you see things from the bigger picture, more global in view. But the funny thing is, we come back to physical resources, do you know what? You actually see more physically. So when you're in a positive state of mind, your peripheral vision actually gets better. Done amazing studies on the elderly with this. So some really cool stuff happens. So this is the broaden and build model. So the more you do it, the better it gets. So the work of Barbara Fredrickson. One other key piece of research that I'm now going to share with you is the work of Dr. Sonja Lyubomirsky. So she sort of picked up where on the key themes of Barbara Fredrickson and looked at a specific positive emotion, which is happiness, or subjective well-being is the fancy scientific term for that, and really did a lot of research into this area. And what I want to show you is, if you cast your attention down to this, the graph down into the bottom left-hand corner, positive and negative emotions. And so basically imagine you're going through life and you have your ups and your downs. You have your positive emotional times and you have your down and negative emotional times. The thing about human beings is that we tend to adapt. Okay, we absolutely adapt to the positives and the negatives. So what this means is that, you know, I am really happy because I got an A in my maths test in grade 5. But do you know what? I'm still not deliriously happy right now. So basically, human beings experience something, and then we come back to our natural set point for happiness, our normal level. The thing is, different people have different levels of normal. Okay, so my set point for subjective well-being or happiness may be different to somebody else's. In fact, it is. And this is what research was all about, is why is one person always happy and the other person just always a bit of a sad sack? So what's going on there? And so there was extensive study done into this area. And what Sonja Lyubomirsky and her team found out by studying identical twins, fraternal twins, all sorts of different audiences and subjects, she found that up to 50% comes down to one thing, and that is your DNA. And when I first read that one, I was like, wow, that's a little bit scary, because I can't do anything about my DNA. My DNA is set. So up to 50% of the difference between set points in any two people comes down to your DNA. The next piece of that puzzle is actually 10%, and that comes down to your circumstances. So basically, what is the thing that has triggered me to go up in a positive mood or down into a negative mood? So my circumstances, it could be my education, my living, my all sorts of things, how much money I earn. What are your circumstances and what impact do they have on your happiness? Well, 10%, not a lot, because human beings adapt pretty well. The good news with all of this is there is a 40% bucket. So 40% is a large amount still, and it is your intentional activities. What do you actually do? What are your strategies? So you cannot sit on the couch and wait for happiness to arrive. It's not going to happen. You have to do something that will cause a positive emotion to happen. Negative emotions happen all by themselves. Positive emotions, you have to intentionally create. So it's really interesting, and this is a very powerful 40% bucket, because the more you do here, according to Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory, can actually start to change your circumstances. The stuff you do will impact the circumstances in which you live. And really spooky, there's another field of study going on at the moment showing that your intentional activities can influence your DNA. Now, I know that sounds weird, but this is the field called epigenetics. And I'll give you a quick example. There is a genetic cause. There's one of the causes of depression, a specific type of depression, is a genetic long-tailed gene version. The trigger to turn that gene on is stress. So if I know I carry the long-tail gene for depression and I'm living a stressful life, then I'm probably going to get depression. However, if I know I carry the gene and I do something about it so I don't live a stressful life, I probably won't get depression. And that same sort of metaphor exists for many illnesses as well out there. So it's not that we don't carry the genes, it's whether we turn the genes on or not. It's how that one works. So epigenetics is a fascinating field. So what I wanted you to get out of this is the 40% is super important, and there's stuff that you can do, and it's going to impact your resilience and well-being. So my question is, what is in your 40% bucket of intentional activities? Now, what I've put here is 4 categories you might like to think about, and we're going to explore some of these categories now. And there's some stuff that you can do that is good for your brain, that will make your brain happy, stuff that will make your body happy, stuff that you can do to actually build relationships with other people and trigger all the social stuff. And then there's stuff that you can do with your environment. And with all of these, what we want to think about is, are they proactive in nature, or are we doing it reactive? Are they passive or are they active? So we're going to have a look at this sort of stuff. But one key thing is for sure, just like an athlete trains out of the moment, so too do you for this stuff. We cannot expect to go and run 100 meters in the Olympics without having trained. We cannot expect to be resilient and have high levels of well-being if we are not practicing resilient strategies and techniques out of the moment. It's just the way it is. So this is our intentional activity that I was talking about. So look, here's some stuff, and you'll get access to all of these, and I've just plonked a few on here, and we're going to explore some of these in more detail from a scientific point of view. But from a brain-based perspective, if you can do anything to stimulate your brain and get it working, it's a good thing for your resilience and well-being. So things like mindfulness, great, and we're going to explore that in more detail. Curiosity is another one. So the emotion of curiosity is really good for you. Learning a language, reading. Now, reading is a great one. It's what we call active, as opposed to watching TV or a movie, which is passive. Your brain has to do a lot more work when you're reading a book, because it has to actually create a mental picture rather than a TV puts that picture into your head. But other stuff like doing puzzles, daydreaming, expressing gratitude, all of these things are really good for your brain. To-do lists and ta-da lists are a good one as well. So to-do list is get your brain organized. Your brain loves to be organized and feels certain when it is. A ta-da list is kind of the opposite, is right. Think of the 10 things that really rock your world or float your boat. You love doing these things. Write those 10 things down and aim to tick 3 of them off a week. So it's kind of the reverse of the to-do list. Little techniques that might help. For your body, the stuff you can do, anything to get it moving, to exercise it is great. Controlled breathing exercises are really good for your body as well. Now, the next 2 is stand tall and proud and smile. So this, and we're going to delve into this in a little bit more detail, it's body-brain theory by Dr. Amy Cuddy. Fantastic stuff. You can see here, dance, juggle, eat well, sleep, drink wine and beer. Look, alcohol, it always comes up when I do these things. And yeah, look, it's a strategy. Absolutely. If you're having a glass of wine to wind down at the end of a busy day, fine. The question is it going to be sustainable or not? And is it your only go-to? Is it going to become habitual? Does one glass turn into 4 bottles? So you have to question, is this sustainable and is it productive for your overall health? Social stuff, yes, but absolutely got to keep our distance at this time. So we're kind of lacking in this area at the moment because we're not probably getting as much oxytocin in our bodies because, of social distancing. But, your loved ones and your family, make sure you hug them. Make sure you touch, you actually connect because that's when your body produces and releases oxytocin. But you can also play with the dogs or your pets because you still get that reaction of oxytocin with any sentient being, with anyone. So it doesn't have to be a human being. So play, cuddle, pat your dog, really good for it. I've got there random acts of kindness, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, and some more gratitude stuff. But also things like, getting out into nature, savoring the moments, of your environment, going to the movies, reading, all of that sort of stuff, really good. Change your environment. So here's just a few. Guaranteed, if you go to Google and you type in resilient strategies, you will come up with a lot of these and you'll come up with a lot more. There are hundreds of strategies. The trick is finding the ones that work for you. That's really, really key. All right. What I would like to do now is to explain some of these in a little bit more detail. Okay, so let's go with this one here. Okay. All right. So here is the work of Dr. Amy Cuddy. So Amy Cuddy is a researcher out of Harvard University, and she's done extensive work in body-brain theory. It's pretty simple, really. So our brains, our mood, our emotions, if we are experiencing a positive emotion, our bodies look different to when we experience a negative emotion. So our brains dictate our physiology. So clearly here, this is a positive emotion being expressed. It's strong, it's open, woohoo, I've just won this race, which is quite different to when we experience a negative emotion. We tend to slump down, we tend to be closed in our body language. Okay, so our physiology changes, inactive. I love that they're just sitting on the couch. Okay, so this is more of a low power pose. So what happened is Amy Cuddy looked at these high power poses and low power poses. So you can see at the top of the screen here, these are what we call high power poses. Arms behind, we've got this Wonder Woman superhero kind of pose here. And then we've got the low power poses, which is really closed off. And especially touching, your chin there is actually quite low in power. So there was some experiments done here, and we were looking at the biochemical changes when people were in high power poses versus low power poses. So interestingly enough, with a high power pose, what happens is that cortisol, remember cortisol, the stress hormone that we have, when you get your body into a high power pose, cortisol drops. Okay? And the other thing that happens is testosterone goes up. So we all have testosterone, and that's for confidence and assertiveness. So high power pose, your body will drop its cortisol and raise up testosterone. Low power poses, the reverse happens. So basically, low power pose, your cortisol levels go up and your testosterone levels go down. So this is actually happens after about 2 minutes of holding that pose. Think about psyching up for a football, think about, the New Zealand rugby teams, they do the haka, they psych up in a very powerful position. They get their cortisol levels down, but they get their adrenaline up and they get their testosterone levels up, ready to play the game. So psyching themselves into it. So here's the thing. So we know our brains tell our bodies how to behave and what to look like, but the mechanism works in reverse. This is the cool thing. So if you were feeling particularly low, if you were to get yourself into a power pose, any one of those, no one has to see you do it. You could go into the bathroom or nick into the public toilets, whatever, and do a superhero pose, and hold it for 2 minutes. You will start to feel better. It's crazy because you will actually experience that biochemical change. Even smiling. When you don't feel like smiling, smile, because your physiology tells your brain, oh, I'm feeling happy. The mechanism works in reverse. Crazy stuff. I know, right? So that's one thing. That's the work of Amy Cuddy. Curiosity is a big one. So if you can get curious, this is really super awesome because research shows, and there's a guy here, Dr. Todd Kashdan, has done a whole body of work around curiosity. So curious people tend to show a greater interest in navigating new situations, they're quite happy in uncertain situations because they tend to have a higher degree of novelty and they have good coping mechanisms. So curiosity has been demonstrated to act as an antidote for anxiety, which is very cool. So what happens is, as you dial up your levels of curiosity, levels of anxiety start to drop. So rather than focusing on the anxiety itself or the thing that you are being anxious about, if you can get curious and ask questions and dig into the why and get curious about something, your anxiety levels will drop. Very cool, very cool. So curious people tend to seek other knowledge, new experiences. Curious people are open to all sorts of other perspectives. So great one. If you can get curious about something, so it could be anything. So just take the time to ask questions. Really, really important. The next one is that we mentioned before is savoring. So savoring is very cool, and I love this quote. So this quote says, "Happiness does not exist in the things themselves, but in the relish that we have for them." Very wise quote. It was actually written by a French author way back in 1694, believe it or not. So yeah, look, a pie is not happiness, but if I enjoy the pie and I relish and I savor that pie, well, fantastic. I get a lot of positive emotion out of that. But what is savoring? So savoring is defined as being a key process to extract positive emotions out of everyday situations or everyday life. It's taking a positive moment and just mentally stretching it out. Taking the time to celebrate it, taking the time to savor in it, bask in your glory, just something great's happened, just make it last longer. So it can be used for past, present, and future states. So basically, I could be reminiscing about some really great stuff that's happened to me in the past, conjure up some mental pictures, and your body will still react in the same way. You will still get the dopamine that are released. You could mindfully focus on the present, really be in the moment, and that will be a positive emotion as well as anticipation for the future. It all works. You will still get dopamine sort of produced in your body if you do these things. You just savor it. And in fact, a psychologist, Dr. Chris Peterson, he did some research back in 2006 on this very thing and found that people who practiced savoring the moment, savoring their food, savoring the environment, just having a sense of awe and taking time to actually do that, showed increased levels of satisfaction with their life, and depression went down. So awesome stuff. So simple things. And the really cool thing with this is no one has to know you're doing it. You just savor it. You know, you savor the moment. You can do it. You can conjure up a positive emotion anywhere, anytime. No one has to know. Very, very cool. The next one I really enjoy too, and it's all about gratitude. So gratitude historically is firmly embedded in many cultures, many religions, the art of giving thanks, showing appreciation and kindness. So, and I know sometimes this sounds a little bit airy-fairy, but it's actually really, really powerful. And it really hit home for me when a couple of years ago, I met a pro surfer, and that's why I've got a picture of a surfer here. So some of you may know Mark Matthews or know of him. Mark Matthews was a big wave surfer. You know, those gigantic waves that they go around. They surf. Unbelievable how they do it. So he was a Red Bull person for a number of years. So anyway, back in 2016, Mark Matthews had an accident. He was filming a documentary in New South Wales, and a huge wave dumped him onto a reef feet first. He broke his leg, he dislocated his knee, he snapped ligaments, he had major nerve damage, he had a slashed artery. He was not in a good state. So he had a very long road ahead for a physical sort of repair job on him. But there was a mental thing that had to happen as well. So he actually developed a real fear of the water. He was, and he was developing depression as well. So he was developing some mental illness. So when he was speaking and I was listening to him, one of his key strategies to actually deal with his rehabilitation was every day practicing gratitude and appreciation. So he kept gratitude journals, appreciation journals. He practiced various techniques to express gratitude. And you can see in this graph on the bottom right-hand side, the heart patterns, the heart rates when experiencing different emotions. So when experiencing frustration and anything on the anger emotion scale, you can see the erratic nature of the heartbeat. Whereas if you are looking at a heartbeat of a person who is experiencing gratitude and practicing appreciation, it's a much smoother sinus curve. So his cardiovascular system is better, but you know it's a great way of dealing with fear as well. So he was saying how much of an advocate he was for this as a technique and how it helped him return to pro surfing as well. So pretty amazing stuff, and an application with a top sports person. So he's now does keynote speeches all over the place. So keep an eye out. Google him as well. Mark Matthews, awesome. The next one is labeling. This is the work of Dr. Matt Lieberman, and basically it's a really funky thing that your brain does. Remember when we looked at the threat response, how the limbic system sort of lights up? We get the cortisol, we get the drop in dopamine, etc. You're in threat mode. You know, you're not thinking, you're just in threat mode. So when that happens, and you might be feeling incredibly frustrated or angry, for example, and you're just trying to articulate how you feel and you can't even get the words out. Okay, so what this work has done is they put people under fMRI scanners and tested all of this out. So basically there's a bit in your brain. It's just above your right ear. It's called the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. You don't have to remember that. It's the bit above your brain here. And it's responsible for language. So if you can, when you are in a threat response, when you're feeling, really annoyed, for example, if you're in a negative state, if you can switch this part of your brain on, it has a dampening effect. So basically what will happen is your threat response will start to come down. It's called a seesaw effect. So easily said, harder to do, because typically we don't have such a great emotional vocabulary. So what you actually need to be able to do is when you are in that heightened state of anxiety or negative emotion, if you can go, how am I feeling right now, and accurately put a word to it, your threat response will quieten down. Freaky, huh? I know, right? So they watch this happen under fMRI scanners, but we don't tend to have a great emotional vocabulary sometimes. How are you today? Good, not bad. Rather than actually have a good emotional vocabulary. So if you want some homework, start to learn some good emotional words, like we started to last week around fear and the different variations of fear. It will help. It's actually it's a technique that's used in education right now. For those of you with children, you may have heard schools say to kids, use your words. So they're having a tantrum, for example, rather than kicking and yelling and screaming, use your words, you will hear them say now, because when they use their words, they trigger this part of their brain and the threat response starts to quieten down. So that's an application for families and schools as well with younger children. So that's labeling. Sounds really minor. It sounds really simple, but again, simple things often have the biggest difference in life. Okay, so that's labeling. Let's have a look now at mindfulness. So mindfulness has been around for thousands of years. Meditation has been around for thousands and thousands of years. And there's a whole body of work around what happens in your brain when you are in a meditative state or practicing mindfulness. And you can see here all of the research and the practice that has emerged showing us the benefits here. So we've got, by practicing mindfulness, lower levels of stress. Your blood pressure will go down. Your vagal tone increases. And this was a question that we got last week. So for those perhaps who weren't on the call, basically in human beings, we have a vagus nerve. It runs from basically the base of your brain to all of your major organs. And if you have a good vagal tone, it means that your body systems are humming. They're ticking along. They're all nicely synchronized. It's working well. You're a well-oiled machine. If you've got bad vagal tone, the messages aren't really connecting through to all of your bodily functions, or your bodily organs as well. So you might be feeling a bit off, your digestion's a bit off, and it's not humming, So think of mindfulness as a bit of a tune-up, just like you get your car tuned up. It's a tune-up for your vagal nerve. So increases your vagal tone. Your immunity gets better because of lower levels of cortisol. Pain management is better. So I personally practice, I hate the dentist, so I practice mindfulness when I go to the dentist. So I kind of zone out a little bit, and pain is manageable, absolutely. Helps with inflammatory conditions, helps manage anxiety. Your sleep is better, good mental clarity. So all of the things that we talked about before from Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory come as a result of mindfulness as well. So boosting emotional resilience and grows white matter. I know, it's cool, right? We used to think that our brains, brain cells, you were born with your brain cells and then they just die off one by one, or if you hit your head, they die off. It's not so true. So there is the white matter. So in your brain, you have white matter and gray matter. And white matter is the connective tissue between the neurons. So it grows that connective tissue. So think of like the insulation around an electric wire, the plastic that goes around to keep the signals really well. Your brain has a myelin white matter sheath to keep the integrity of the signals in your brain. So mindfulness actually grows that stuff. How cool is that? Wowzers. All you have to do is practice mindfulness and do it regularly. Make it a habit. Okay. Nearly at the end, so hang in there. The last one I wanted to share with you is random acts of kindness. And this is particularly relevant now. We are seeing lots of these things, which is really heartening. You know, we're seeing the best out of people at this time. We're seeing the worst in some, but I want to focus on the best. So doing random acts of kindness for other people is really great for you as the giver of the kindness. It's also great for the person receiving it, but the random bit is not for me, it's for the person receiving it. You know, it's random to them, but I have to actually intentionally do it. I have to plan it. I have to think about what I want to do and do it. Whether that be, you know, I noticed it was, there's this movement at the moment. People are pushing into the lines at the supermarket checkout and paying for people's groceries, you know, and then leaving. So doing some stuff. And I think when COVID first broke out, there was a gentleman who saw the unemployment line at Centrelink, and he went and withdrew thousands of dollars and went and gave a $100 note to everybody on the line. Just random acts of kindness. Amazing stuff, can have a huge impact. And what happens then is that the receiver of that act of kindness is more likely than to go and do something nice for somebody else. So we get this ripple effect that goes out, and is only good for, you know, our society and us and our brains. So we get a lot out of random acts of kindness. It's one of my favorite things to do. Okay, so I've done a lot of talking, and I'm going to open up the floor to some questions in a moment. So there are things, just to recap here, that you can do for your brain, things for your body, things to do with other people, and things to do to savor the environment and savor the moment, etc. So my question to you is to think about what is in your 40% bucket. You know, treat yourself as a scientific experiment. If you want to give mindfulness a go, give it a go. If it doesn't work for you, fine, it's not your thing. You know, find something else, but you need to do something. And you need to have a mix of strategies as well, so that, you know, and so that some are proactive and some are reactive, some to help you out in the moment. So breathing exercises, for example, you can do in the moment. No one has to know you're doing them. But if you have, say, for example, if your coping mechanisms, if your strategies for well-being were limited, say, for example, mine was going to the gym, and I've got a friend who that's exactly his coping mechanism. He's a gym junkie and just loves it, but the gyms are all closed. So he's really struggling because he doesn't have a broader repertoire of things he can do for his well-being. So he's sort of suffering. So if you had a balanced approach and start to think of it in these 4 categories, treat yourself as a scientific experiment. Find the things that work for you and build habits out of them, because it will serve you well for your overall well-being and for your levels of resilience moving forward. And great to teach your kids these things as well. All right, so look, I might open up the floor for some questions and just quickly throw to Nicole. Do we have any questions coming in on the line?
Hello, Scott. We certainly do. First question from Roger is, do you think goal setting is still a good idea?
Yes. I do think goal setting is a good idea because human beings, if we are working towards something, we are more likely experiencing positive emotions. And it's really interesting about how you set the goals. If you are setting goals to avoid something, not as effective. But if you have an aspirational goal to move towards something, you're actually much more likely to achieve it. So if you are able to inject some kind of positive emotion around it, then yeah, you're much more likely to achieve it. We tend to like having that direction. Our brains like to move towards something. Otherwise, in the absence of goals, human beings tend to flounder. And there's a large body of the psychologist. Robert Biswas-Diener is a psychologist, and he's done a lot of stuff around goals. But yeah, human beings, in the absence of direction and moving towards something, we tend to flounder and we go on a downward spiral. So yeah, absolutely, I would say set yourself some goals, and they don't have to be massive goals, small, achievable goals. But set yourself up and ask yourself, why am I doing it? And make sure it's oriented to a positive, aspirational way. You're more likely to achieve. If I wanted to get a promotion, right? For example, if I want to get a promotion, and my reason is to get more money and to get more status, you're less likely to achieve that one than if you had said, I want to get a promotion because, you know what, I really want that job and I can make a difference, to the company, the world, whatever. So if you can frame it in your mind with a positive angle, rather than just going for status, money, whatever, you're much more likely to achieve it. So inject some positive emotion around it. Thanks, Roger.
So Scott, just in terms of touching on the downward spiral, I think this question goes well. If activity, physical or mental, increases happiness, does that mean depression is actually the default state of a human being?
Well, it depends. It depends on the human being. So there are actually 5 times as many neurons in your brain dedicated to the threat response. And that's to keep us alive. So we will go to the negative first. We will not trust first. If we have a thing called a friend-foe response, we will always go enemy first. It keeps us alive. So we actually have to make an effort to actually be positive, absolutely. So default, but having said that, there are different people, there are some people whose set points, and if you remember that graph of the ups and downs, their set point might be higher. And there certainly will be people who have a lower set point. And so they might appear, to be more on the depressed side. But as a human being, that's Sonia Lyubomirsky's work. So the difference between this happy person and the grumpy person, it comes down to DNA, circumstance, and intentional activities. So you can start to, if your natural set point is lower, you can actually start to live above your set point of happiness. But yeah, the strange, we're wired to pick up on the negative stuff first. So left uncontrolled, yeah, we can spiral down. Absolutely. That's why people who live like hermits tend to go a little bit crazy because they're not getting any interaction. We are social creatures and we need each other to bounce off and gain energy and get oxytocin. We have to do stuff. So look at every culture in the world. They've got rituals and things around celebration to build, levels of happiness. We want to be happy. Remember the organizing principle of our brain is to minimize danger, keep the threat at bay, but also we want reward. That's the dopamine. It's the feel-good stuff. And when we get it, we want more of it. But we've got to do stuff. So I hope that's answered your question. The default state of all human beings is depressed. Not really. It's somewhere in the sliding scale.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks. Roger's just asked, what emotion do we tend to experience the most?
Well, it depends. Anger is a very common one if we're talking on a negative emotion, on the negative side. Basically, anger or a variation of it. And anger is when something gets in the way of my plans, whatever it might be. And it might be a very low level emotion. It might just be annoyance. of anger. Fear is a very common emotion. Fear of the unknown, fear of looking stupid. It's a bit of a default state. And remember the first time you asked someone out on a date? It's like, oh, I want to avoid that. It takes a lot of courage to do those sorts of things. So fear is a very natural thing as well. So fear is there to keep you safe. So both anger and fear are there to keep you safe. So they'll kick in pretty quickly. But if you make it, what is the most common emotion? Well, it will depend on the individual. So, and what's in your habits. So if you have set up a brain habit that you're very suspicious of people, well, then perhaps fear, is an overriding one. But if your habits are different and you're practicing, or you've grown up in a household where celebration is key and pride and, and all of those sorts of things, and giving thanks is part of your environment and your upbringing, well, then that will be the predominant emotion. So it's whatever is in you, whatever has been set up in your brain, really as a habit. If you've exercised that part of your brain more regularly, that's the default state. That's where it will go. Yeah. So got to train it. You've got to do some stuff. So again, sorry, there's no definitive answer. I can't say most common. It depends on the person. Hopefully,
Scott, there's been a couple of questions, and I think it was fascinating to hear that use your words when we say to the children is that example of labelling.
Yeah. What
strategies can we do to instill mindfulness into our kids apart from the use your words?
Yeah, sure. So look, there's a whole lot of apps around, like Smiling Mind is a really good one for kids. There are a whole lot of little apps available to promote mindfulness in kids. So there's some really great resources out there. So I would encourage you just do a search on some of those. But it's about setting the right environment for them to be focusing on one thing. So mindfulness is kind of the act of having focused attention and sort of getting rid of the distractions. So one of the key things that you can do is to eliminate as many distractions when you're trying to get your kids to engage in a mindfulness practice. And you can do mindful anything. It could be Lego, and just really carefully focusing on the construction. Could be just one thing that you do. It could be, let's focus on our breathing. There are many, many different things. Visualizing kind of mindfulness practices are good for kids because it taps into their imagination. So you can take them on some guided little storytelling things as well. But heaps of stuff. Just go to the App Store, Google mindfulness for children, and there are heaps of techniques out there. So there's tons.
Okay, Benjamin has asked, how can you use these tools to move forward with a creative idea when you're stuck, or if you're stuck with fear?
Okay, yeah, really good question. So if you've got a creative idea, your fear is a great inhibitor. Fear is a really great inhibitor. And so what we're really talking about here is the difference between what's called a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So I would really recommend having a look at some work by Dr. Carol Dweck. So she wrote a book called The Growth Mindset. And it's really fascinating because it applies in so many different areas, in professional sports, in business, in parenting, in creativity. So basically, what we're saying is that the growth mindset is that somehow you have to get over the fear of failure, the fear of looking dumb. So translate fear and try and go, fear is not like failure. If we take failure, so failure, or fear of failure is not a negative thing, as we all have probably come to be aware of it. Failure is just a way of learning. Failure is figuring out, well, that's not how I do it. I've got to do something else. If we look at, say, for example, there's a couple of really good examples. Thomas Edison, how many times did he try and fail before inventing the light bulb? So if he'd given up, I think something like 1,000 times, if he'd given up at, 827, well, we didn't have the light bulb. Oprah Winfrey was deemed unfit for TV and fired, So if she had not had a growth mindset, then she wouldn't have treated that failure as an opportunity to learn and go on and do bigger and better things. So if we can get over the fear of failure and in our minds flip it around and go, this is not failure, this is an opportunity to learn, then your creative ideas have a vehicle in which to be heard. So that would be my advice there is to tap into a growth mindset and get rid of fear of failure and say, this is not failure, this is learning. Great one for kids as well. Thanks,
Scott. Jeff has asked, how do you think these can be applied in a corporate environment?
Well, it's all of these skills. Well, at Schneider, we do this. We have I run courses in this all the time. We have a global wellbeing program, so we have key advocates for this right across the company. So it can be applied. So we have mindfulness groups. We're encouraged to actually do these things. So in a corporate environment, yeah, it certainly, absolutely can be done. So if it is built into the fabric of any kind of leadership capability within an organization, you're on a winner. So if your leadership teams are giving you permission and the skills to be able to practice these things, it can only be good for the individual and therefore the company. So long as, the organization has that view, well, this stuff will flourish within an organization. Because, if our brains are all operating at optimal human functioning, it's good for the business, it's good for the people, it's good for the business. So the application of positive psychology, neuroscience, and emotional intelligence in organisation has proven effects for productivity, safety issues, and money making, basically. So if your workforce is happy and healthy and creative and view failure as just an opportunity to learn, well, you're in a really good spot. So, but to drive that, our leaders in the organisations need to understand the power of this kind of thing, the social capital that gets built, all of the reciprocity that goes on. So it lends itself to being a really healthy organisation if the individuals are allowed to flourish as well. So, I've seen it work in organisations, and I see teams get turned around. I've seen some of the leaders that I've trained in Schneider, come from having teams that are not happy to really productive and really happy. So, yeah, it works.
Thanks, Scott. Joshua has asked, there's a lot of things that give us happiness in the short term, but how do we develop more long-term happiness? Is it a case of sort of gathering all those small moments of happiness into a bigger picture and making them the goal?
Yeah, it's a great question, Joshua. So remember, going back to, see if I can pull this slide up. So the theory that we talked about here from Sonia Lyubomirsky, here's my little moments of happiness. So if I am able to, through these strategies and techniques, when I experience some positive emotion, if I am able to hang on to it for a bit longer, if I am able to savor it for a little bit longer, if I'm able to celebrate it and get as much out of that as possible, and then conversely, when I experience a negative emotion, if I go, you know what, this is just life. It's an opportunity to learn. No, I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to pick myself up, and this is just my perception of it, and I can get over that quicker. So in other words, if I extend my highs and reduce my lows, then over time, I start to build the resilience and the well-being, and that becomes almost like my new set point. I start to live above my natural set point for happiness. But you've got to do something about it. That's the 40% intentional activities. That's what we need to do. So consciously, proactively, use those, extend the highs, reduce the lows with whatever technique works for you, whether it be savoring, whether it be power poses, whether it be curiosity, whether it be gratitude. Find the things that work for you and habitually do it. I hope that makes sense.
Thanks, Scott. I think we've got time for another one, which I believe links to your to-do and to-do list. Indy has said, Do you think writing a list every day of things we need to do and things we want to get done is a good practice to make sure we keep a balance?
Yeah. And that's a really good point. Even the language there, the things I have to do, things I want to do. The have tos have a negative connotation about it. The want to has a positive connotation about it. And you're even able to, even the things you have to do, you can approach them with a different mindset. So first of all, to answer your question, yes, write down a list of things that you want to do. Another technique is to, it's called your top three. So once a week is a good amount. Once a week, write down the top three things that have happened in your week and revisit them in your mind. Some people do it on a daily basis, but what are your top three? What's made your top three? And this is a really good thing to do because it invokes a part of your brain called your reticular activating system. It's a filtering system. So if you know that every week you've got to write down you want to write down your three top things, your brain's going to look for them. You're going to be more open to them. As opposed to if you want to write down the worst things that happened to you every week, well, then that's what you focus on. That's what your brain sees and hears. So focusing on the top three or focusing on the things that you want to do and flipping around your mental sort of view of I have to do something to flip and go, you know what? Yeah, I want to do that anyway. How you show up to do that is really important and will make a big difference. Yeah. So both is good, to do and to that. All right.
Last question, Scott.
Hour.
Yeah. Very last one, and then we'll let you wrap up. How do we manage or respond to an angry person?
Okay. So I wish I've got a slide on this. I just don't have it on me. But basically, when somebody is in anger, if they're in full anger, the best thing is to walk away because they're in total limbic state. Trying to reason with an angry person or a furious person is really difficult because their prefrontal cortex is not working. They're totally in limbic brain. So one technique is to match the energy but not the emotion. And what I mean by that is that if someone's angry, for example, and you came in and went, calm down, everything's going to be all right. The typical response is, I don't want to bloody calm down because they're in anger mode. And if I come in really calm, usually it says to the person's brain, you don't understand, you don't get me. That's the kind of subtle message that's being put across. But if someone's really angry and you come and go, oh my goodness, yes, that is, and you come in and you agree with them, or, you come in, but your voice and your energy level is higher, has more energy to it. It's not angry, it's more neutral. Because if you come in and argue with them at a higher level, that doesn't go anywhere. But if you can come in with higher levels of energy in your voice, then it says to the person who's angry, they're listening to me. They get it. And then basically if you start to bring down your levels of energy and start to move across to be more positive, they will follow you. it's a mirroring kind of technique as well. So it's an interesting one. So match the energy and then bring it down is probably the best thing to do. If you can't do that, just breathe, walk away, come back to it at a later stage, because they're not ready to actually hear any logical arguments. You can't reason with somebody who is in that state. You've got to bring them down first and then talk to them. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Scott. I'll leave you to wrap up.
Okay. Wow, the hour flew past. Thank you to everyone for joining us. And just a reminder that these resources, the green button down below, you'll get these resources with some explanatory notes. You'll also get a link to the last webinar that we did. But just to finish off with, just to let you know that on May the 5th, we're doing our third webinar in this series. And this one's all about tapping into your strengths. So some of the questions that came up about, how do you bring your ideas to life? How do you, with the have to and the want to, so that we just talked about then. So this is the concept of tapping into your strengths. And there's a whole lot of research done around the benefits to human beings when we are able to identify what our strengths are, and then we use those strengths, and how we can apply them in our personal lives, how we can apply them at work to really benefit everybody. So make sure that you sign in for that one. So if you wanted to make sure that you are informed of all of these webinars that are coming up, just make sure you opt in so you'll be the first to know about future webinars. And I think Nicole has posted the link in the Q&A box about how you can opt into these things as well to receive communications from us. So thank you very much. It's been great to talk to you again, even though I can't see you. I miss that, being able to talk to and see faces. But one day again, we'll do some face-to-face stuff. But thank you very much. Enjoy your day, and hopefully we will see you on another webinar. Thanks, everyone.